It is 3:54 in the afternoon. Today is the first day of September. Of October, I'm sorry, in 2025, October 1st, 2025, 3:54 in the afternoon. The sun will set in about 2 to 2.5 hours, making this the beginning of the 10th day of the 7th month. For those that are keeping track, that means that today, this evening at sunset, will be Yom Kipurym. It is a marvelous day in terms of what it symbolizes with Yahweh, a day very different than it is observed in Judaism. You see, in Judaism, they have been hoodwinked by the stupidity of the rabbis who have replaced Taruw'ah, which is the Day of Days. Taruw'ah is the greatest show on earth. It's the most spectacular festival that will ever be witnessed by humankind. And Taruw'ah is the first day of the 7th month, but they replaced that with Rosh Hashanah, which is the head of the year, and therefore the first day of the first month in the Babylonian year, doing nothing but upsetting God in the process. This is the 7th month, 10 days after Taruw'ah, which is going to feature a gleaning of Israelites and Yehudim, and then the great spectacle of the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, so that the remaining remnant of Israel might be purged of religiosity and be prepared for this day. Yom Kipurym, the day of reconciliation, the great homecoming, the ultimate family reunion, when Yahweh is reunited with his people. When Dowd returns as king, when the Messiah is home, when the Son of God is known for exactly who he is and what he has achieved. That all takes place on Yom Kipurym. And that means, ladies and gentlemen, that this is not a day of affliction. It is not even a fast. It is a great celebration. Do you think that God's going to celebrate a family reunion, the ultimate homecoming with his people, after essentially 6,000 years of estrangement, with just brief interludes under Abraham, oh so briefly, somewhat under Yishak, very, very briefly under Jacob, not very long under the experience with Moshe, because that was mostly rebellion, very, very briefly under Dowd, and ever so swiftly under, and really not uncommittedly under Hezekiah. That really, beyond that, Israel has been estranged from Yahweh. It got so bad that Yahweh, through the prophet Hosha, told Hosha to go off and marry a temple prostitute, a religious whore, so that he could empathize with what Yahweh was dealing with the religiosity of Israel. And then he said, we're going to write a divorce announcement. I'm divorcing Israel. I'm going to have nothing to do with Israel. I'm returning to heaven. They're on their own. I will return to them when they return to me, not before. And so after all of this time, you can measure it either as 2,700 years or as 3,000 years since Dowd, or 3,450 years since the Exodus, or 6,000 years since you were booted out of the garden. After all that time, Yahweh is going to be reunited with his family. Yisrael is going to come home. God's people are going to listen to what we're saying. They're going to respond and accept Yahweh by name. Oh my goodness, can you imagine? They're going to realize that Dowd is the returning king, the Messiah, their savior, the very Son of God. And you think that God is going to make that a day of mourning, a day of affliction, a fast? Are you out of your ever-loving mind? This is the day to celebrate happily ever after. From this point on, we re-enter the garden of great joy. Imagine that. After 6,000 years, God is allowing us back in because of what we have come to know from that tree of knowledge. And because we've chosen to make ourselves receptive of the tree of lives, who is represented by the Shemach, the great branch that is Dowd, David. This is going to be a great and glorious celebration. And during that previous statement, as we were considering God's instructions on this date, we realized that we were asked to answer his invitation and approach the presence of the feminine manifestation of this fiery light to draw near unto Yahweh. And we realized that it was our souls that were being invited, and that our souls are feminine, and this fire is feminine, so you can see the connection between the two, and that fire is transformative. It takes the uselessness and the liability of our physical bodies and transforms them into radiant energy and light, and thus makes our soul liberated in time and space, in dimensions, perfects us, and does every positive thing you could possibly imagine. That is what we're being invited to participate in, and that is God's offer to us. Now, to capitalize on this offer, you've got to do a little more than whoop whoop. It will also require that you embrace the great sacrificial gift that was offered by your King, by our Messiah, by the very Son of God, when he in his second of three lives volunteered to fulfill Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym. Yes, it was Dowd who did those things. 33 CE, exactly on the date he said he would. Back in 555 BCE, he told us precisely the date that he would fulfill Chag Matzah. He even wrote about it back around 1000 BCE when he told us he would be crucified in fulfilling Pesach, and then his soul would carry our guilt into Sheowl on Matsah, so that he would finally be released unto Yahweh as the Bikuwrym on behalf of firstborn children, Bikuwrym. He told us all of this, and yet his people have ignored it. And so many have refuted it and have desecrated it by claiming what was achieved by Dowd on behalf of a misnomer like Jesus Christ. It's repulsive. So there is a consequence, ladies and gentlemen, both for making the right decision and accepting what God is offering on this day of reconciliations and benefiting for what God has accomplished through Pesach, Matzah, Bikuwrym, Shavuot, and Taruw'ah prior to it, or ignoring it, or profaning it, or desecrating it. Christianity, there is no celebration of Pesach, Matzah, Bikuwrym, Shavuot, Taruw'ah, or Yom Kipurym. So there is no benefit for anyone who is a Christian. You are excluded from heaven. They're excluded from God's presence. Same thing true, of course, as in Islam, although Islam has far more problems than that. And of course, in Judaism, they've managed to corrupt all 7 of Yahweh's 7 Moed Mikra. They don't celebrate any of them as they were intended. So they're all counterproductive too. So you need to know that there's a consequence of not recognizing what God was offering. As a good father, he'll tell you, if you accept what I'm offering, it's going to be very, very good for you. Yeah, you're going to be immortal. You're going to be perfected. You're going to be adopted. You're going to inherit the universe. You're going to be enriched. You're going to be empowered. You'll be emancipated. It's going to be really, really good. We'll go off and explore the universe together. Have a great time. But if you choose to spit on my son's offer, if you choose to steal and give to false messiahs what he has achieved, well, that's not going to turn out very well for you. Truthfully, any soul, God said, which or who, depending on how you want to define a soul. But a soul is a nephesh, an individual consciousness, who by association does not answer and respond. Lo ana. Remember the last time he was asking you to ana, to respond? He was asking your soul to respond by approaching the feminine manifestation of this light. To approach him. Now he's saying truthfully, indeed, surely, actually, emphasizing this point. Because it is certain. Any and every soul, nephesh, individual consciousness, who or which, by association, does not answer and respond, does not reply by making a declarative statement and engaging in thought, vocally communicating during this life-sustaining and essential, estem day, that soul will be cut off and either eliminated or separated. Karat, the very verb that sits at the heart of the covenant. Every soul that does not respond, without exception, to this life-sustaining and essential day, that soul will be cut off and either eliminated or separated from being with this family. Kara called out, stupidly called Leviticus 23:29. God's not kidding around. He gave you a 7-step plan to live forever, to inherit the universe, to be adopted into his family, to be literally a son and daughter of God. Live forever, travel across space and time. He's offering all that to you, being empowered beyond your imagination, enriched with capabilities that allow us to do things that are beyond what any human has even fathomed previously. All just by accepting the conditions of the covenant and answering his invitations to meet with him 7 times a year, doing so in the manner consistent with his intent. However, should you not do so, any soul, and that would include 100% of Christians, 100% of Christians, 100% of Muslims, 100% of Marxists, truthfully, any soul. This would also be 100% of Jews who practice and believe in and promote Judaism, because you got this day all screwed up. Truthfully, any and every, all souls who by association do not answer and respond, who do not reply by making a declaration after engaging in thought, that soul will suffer the effect of non-responsiveness during this estem, this backbone of days, this bone of my bones, this life-sustaining, this very essential, substantive, invigorating, corporeal day. That soul will be cut off and either eliminated or separated. Yes, I'm repeating myself, but you need to understand this. God's not kidding around, and you shouldn't treat your soul with such disdain that you don't pay any attention to what he's saying. He is being emphatic. All means all, that's all means. 2 outcomes of Karat. Karat can mean your soul is severed, ceasing to exist. That would be the best possible outcome of ignoring this day. This, the 6 of 7 steps home. But Karat also means uprooted, tossed away, exiled, separated, cut away, Well, if you're cut away, you're cut off, you're uprooted, you're tossed aside, that's far worse than dying. Because the only place you can be tossed away at this point would be Sheowl. And the determining factor is whether or not you are like the rabbis or influencers or politicians and the religious who promote the lies against Yahweh's plan. Then you're going to hell. Don't blame me, blame yourself. God's testimony was clear. Billions and billions and billions of these books containing this message have been distributed. You can read them. Go online. I've translated this passage over and over and over again. Offer it to you free. Sharing now from you from volume 6 of the Yada Yahowah series, free at yadayah.com. Very early on in that book. This is a life-sustaining and essential day, and if you choose to ignore it, your soul will either be cut off and either eliminated or separated from being with this family and you. If ever key was worthy of our attention, surely it's worth emphasizing here. Do not expect there to be any exemption to this rule. Kol means all, and as I have said, that's all means, and key means absolutely for certain, no exceptions. So while we exist as mortal men and women, are liberated and confused if your preference is for additional non-binary genders, our bodies and souls are integrated with such that they are codependent. One ceases to exist without the other. Soul and body, they right now are codependent. Your body fails, then your soul is going to either fail or be incarcerated so it can be sent to Sheowl. The only way that a soul exists in a positive way, apart from a body, is to be part of God's covenant and to avail yourself of these 7 Moed Mikre. However, when the time comes for our physical bodies, such that they submit to the ultimate call of nature and our designed mortality, all that will be left is our Nephesh, our consciousness. In this life, we tend not to think much of our souls and a lot of our bodies. But in the hereafter, we won't think much of our bodies. And you won't even think of your soul if you don't capitalize on what I'm sharing with you. And you will rue the day that your soul was conceived if you speak against what we're talking about here. A Nephesh soul, which is, I should say, Karat, cut off from the family of souls, either ceases to exist or it is eternally separated and exiled. Karat provides for both outcomes, elimination or incarceration. If a person appears more to prefer the continuation of your soul, and you are not part of the covenant because you didn't capitalize on the conditions of the covenant or this 7-step path to God, and you think that continuing existence separated from God is more appealing than ceasing to exist, then your perspective is likely, more corporeal than spiritual, and you're not going to care for the outcome very much. When our physical bodies finally yield to life's ordeals, our souls are going to endure one of 3 outcomes. 1, if we've listened to Yahweh, about 1 in a million do, we accept the conditions of the Bereth as he outlined them. There are 5 conditions. And we have attended the Mikre as they were designed. There's 7 of them, and each has a specific purpose. Our Nephesh, enveloped in his Ruach, and as a result of his son's sacrifice, will ascend to Shamayim. Doing so next on Shabuah, and then on Taruw'ah. and we will continue to live among the covenant family of souls. Option 2, no reward, no punishment. For those who have ignored Yahweh and have chosen instead to be political or religious, agnostic or atheist, conspiratorial or otherwise confused or distracted, such souls will simply cease to exist, fading away. These are crimes of omission from God's point of view. You were misled, but you didn't mislead. Heaven forbid, but for those who have opposed Yahweh or his people, who have chosen to lead others away from him or harass them by promoting political, religious, or conspiratorial schemes, or as are so prevalent now among MAGAs and Marxists, both ends of the spectrum, Muslims and Christians, and in Judaism, then these souls will be sentenced to an eternity in Sheowl, forever incarcerated in a black hole. And my advice to you is to make that decision quickly. Trump yesterday announced that his intent was for the U.S. military to ignore the U.S. Constitution and swear an oath of allegiance to him, and that his first intent on using them would be against domestic enemies of Donald Trump in America, in America's cities, fighting Americans. And his speech and that of his boy toy was to disregard all morality, even the Geneva Convention, and to be ruthless. Now, if you think that's a good idea, well, Trump also inflames the passions of war against both Russia and China, and may soon even against Iran again, also engaging Russia and China. And you think that Trump's idea of causing war everywhere and controlling America through military operations so that he doesn't have to run for re-election, and so that his popularity is irrelevant apart from his confabulating mind. If you think that might be a problem, you may want to accept the terms of the covenant right now, because we're going into a really rough patch. And Trump is possessed by Satan. He is the person that Christians have sought as the Antichrist. He is the Torahless one. He is the great betrayer. Israel, he is your greatest foe, and yet you think he is your greatest friend. You're easily confused, Israel. Obviously so. And that speech, just yesterday, was one of the gravest, most sinister, deplorable rants in, well, probably several thousand years. In fact, I didn't think Satan was that sadistic, but evidently he is. And so far, we've had one of 800 generals and admirals resign, just one. Congratulations to that one, a 4-star in the Air Force, but only one. It's apparent that all the rest prefer their careers, their cushy and prestigious jobs, to honoring their conscience or the Constitution. So I would respond rather quickly if I were you, because the world's going to hell and fast. So while God is not going to make an exception for the, well, I've lived a good life plea, or even, I've got such a good heart, he's not being entirely rigid in this proposition. No. The actionable verb, ana, was conveyed in the imperfect conjugation. And that's cause for celebration in and of itself. This means that the moment anyone stops being stupid by rebuffing Yahweh's invitation, and the moment they choose to respond to his summons, you're good to go. Option 1 is in the offing again. All you have to do is stop stupid. Unfortunately, only 1 in a million people are going to do that. But 1 in a million, that's still 8,000 today. It's a pretty goodly number that will stop stupid somewhere along the way. Now, turning to the other verb, not only does Karat provide for both eventualities, elimination and exile, it offers yet another contrast. The covenant was established with the same verb. We are cut into it, or we're cut out of the bereth based upon our response to Yahweh's conditions and his invitations. Also telling, Karat, to cut into or out of, to exclude or to include, was shaded in the Niphal perfect. In this case, the subject, which is the soul, both carries out and receives the result of being Karat, cut off at this moment in time. Therefore, whatever fate we choose is the one we are given. You get to choose if you want to live with God forever in heaven, whether you want to spend your time with fellow religious and political devotees in hell, or you just say, okay, that was a good run. I'm done. I'm going to take a dirt nap. It's over. You get to choose. Now, mind you, the choice of I want to live forever in heaven and inherit the universe, well, that comes at a price. Yeah, sorry to tell you it does. You've got to learn what Yahweh was offering. You need to understand what he is asking in return. You need to appreciate that there are 5 conditions of the covenant and 5 benefits, and the benefits are offered by what Dowd achieved when he fulfilled Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym. You have to know who Dowd is. You have to know why, since Dowd is the Messiah and Son of God and our Savior, that Jesus Christ fellow never existed. You need to know that rabbis are a deadly, derelict, and destructive cult that has not only brought forth Christianity and therefore the Holocaust, but also Islam and all of the most recent bouts with Islamic terrorism. And they are not to be trusted. They are to be disregarded. They're to be despised. So, the first condition of the covenant is to reject religion and politics, to walk away from the Babel, the confusing intermixing of truth and lies that took place in the birthplace of integrated religion and politics, and that would be in Babylon. To walk away from the family of man, the human culture, from celebrating the high holy days and a new year that begins with Rosh Hashanah, celebrating the Babylonian New Year, and then a day of twirling chickens or of self-denial. That's a lot to it. You need to understand what God's rules are. He has house rules. After all, he's inviting you to live with him forevermore. He doesn't want dunderheads. If you can't stop stupid, then, well, stupid's not allowed. There are 2 significant challenges in translating this divine declaration out of Hebrew into English. The first is how to treat the feminine noun nephesh. Is it properly rendered as it or she? Even as a guy, I have a she nephesh soul. It doesn't mean I'm gender fluid or anybody else is. It's just that in the Hebrew, the word for soul is feminine. The word for covenant is feminine. The word Torah happens to be feminine. Does it make Torah girl? No. The word for Ruach, spirit, is feminine. Does it make the Ruach girly? No. It's just in English, when something is feminine, we would normally say she, but the Nephesh is our person, so we don't like to say she unless you are a girl, and it sounds so impersonal. So anyway, that's an issue that you have to deal with going from Hebrew to English. And we're talking in English, and these books are written in English because English is not only the primary language of the world, it is overwhelmingly the most commonly read and spoken language in the world. It's also the language spoken by far more Jews than Hebrew or any other. And it is the language of intelligent communication between people. And so this is why we're having this discussion. We're taking Hebrew terms and explaining them in English so more people can understand them. So should we render Asher, that would be the second challenge, as which by association or who by association, referencing an object or a person? Is the soul, the Nephesh, an object, or is it a person? The same question arises in reference to the verb Karat, which was conveyed in the third person feminine singular, which is either it or she when addressing an object or a person. In this case, for clarity, I wrote that soul will be cut off and either eliminated or separated, rather than she or it. And then when the Nephesh soul goes from being the subject of the sentence to the object of the final and concluding verb, we must determine the most accurate way to convey he, which is the family or her family, the family of her, but her family. Is the best way to communicate the intended meaning to translate the suffixed personal feminine pronoun hy as it's, her, or soul. And since that is what he is referencing. The second challenge, of course, lies within because it can be translated as people, family, or related kin, even community, and in some cases, ethnicity or nation. Further pronounced M rather than the same two letters serve as an inclusive preposition. While M means together with and among, I comprised with he, being with its family, because I think that God's thought would be more clearly understood with the community and kinship of living souls, particularly as part of the covenant. So with so much at stake, full disclosure is appropriate, along with complete transparency, and I've tried to do that throughout so that you know exactly what the challenges are, because translations require a bit of artistry. It's not just a rigor of saying, well, the number one rendering of this word is this, let's put that word in like that, when many words have many nuanced meanings, both symbolic meanings and quite literal connotations, and many words like ana, this respond and reply, while the first 8-10 connotations of ana fall under that kind of response, reply, answer, make a declaration, that sort of thing. After you get through the first 8 or so, you reach things that are negative, like afflict. So it's important to flesh out this so that you're in an empowered position to be able to think the process through and understand it. Because, well, your future of your soul is riding on it. I want you to have the information you need to make an intelligent decision. The more you know, the better, including being aware that languages are exceedingly valuable and yet very imperfect implements. Now, at this point in our review of Yahweh's story, it is unlikely that you'd be here and listening unless you are into the details and the possibilities that God is communicating, and you are committed to learning and understanding. So I make no apologies for being pedantic. Also, I expect that you have come to realize that when God works through people, he recognizes that they will be incorporated into his presentation. That's why he spoke through Moshe. That's why he spoke and acted through Dowd. These people were literally incorporated into a story. They are individuals with their own attributes and aptitudes and attitudes. They're not machines. God wants it that way. When we consider this presentation of Yom Kipurym in the context of its fulfillment, in Malachi, the prophet tells us that upon the occasion of Yahweh's return, those who do not revere his name, Yahweh's name, his Shabbat, and his Debar word, will be uprooted and severed from the land and the vine. It is yet another affirmation that God will return on this day. Now let's be clear, because, well, God is being quite precise. He is not saying, as Christians or Muslims profess, obey me or I'll torture your sweet little behind in hell forever. That would be Allah. Instead, he is announcing, if you ignore my invitations to resolve our differences, then your current mortal existence is the only life that you will experience. Utterly fair, reasonable, responsible, moral. Further, if you oppose Yahweh, his people, or his intent, you're going to be held accountable. The consequence is eternal exile. The provision is from God. The choice is ours. And now you know. The integrated fabric of the Torah and prophets conveys a consistent message. Forgiveness and reconciliations are gifts granted by Yahweh. Therefore, for those who think that they can provide for themselves, there is a less desirable option. Okay. Now, before we go on, we are now, in the range of 2 hours from, at least here in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. Less than 2 hours away from the sun setting and our beginning of the celebration of the Day of Reconciliation, Yom Kipurym. Notice God didn't set a menu. God hasn't asked us to do anything except he's asked us to recognize that he is offering to transform our souls through a symbolic fiery light so that our physical bodies are transformed into energy, radiant energy, and into light energy, so that that becomes the carrier of our souls. That's it, isn't it? That's all he's asked for so far. Can you do that? Any source of light would be sufficient to flesh out to this word picture, would it not? Sure, you can light a candle of some sort and imagine your soul approaching it and the transformation that would take place as a result. But really what you're doing is you're paying attention to the fact that this is the 6th of 7, Moed Mikre, that Yahweh has offered, and that this is the day 8 years from now, on this day, that Yahweh is returning with Dowd, his beloved son, and that the earth will have been transformed in the conditions experienced during Eden, and that Dowd is going to come back as brilliant as the sun and as Elyon, as the influence of God. These are the things we know. We know that there will be a mortal remnant of Israelites and also of Goyim that will be gathered in Israel to have benefited from the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah just 10 days prior. That will have been the greatest show, the greatest spectacle in human history 10 days ago in preparation for this day. The family reunion. Appreciate what God is offering, what he has already achieved through fulfilling Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym. That is what should be in your mind as you celebrate this day. Appreciative. Zechariah 12 is a wonderful example. It talks about the Spirit of Yah coming upon Jerusalem, the source of reconciliation. And God says then his people are going to look up to him along with the one that they have pierced, and they're going to weep for him as one would weep for a firstborn son, because the one who was pierced is the firstborn son of God. He is the one who fulfilled Pesach by allowing the Romans to crucify him. And he is the one returning with Yahweh. That's what you ought to be thinking about. And any soul who, by association, continually attempts to perform any part of the work of the malaka, of the spiritual counselor, this messenger of God, during this life-sustaining and essential day, that specific individual and soul I will eliminate, such that it ceases to exist. I made a declaration about a year ago about malaka. And there are many ways to look at this word, but it is rendered in most Bibles based upon what came out in the King James and also in the Jewish Publication Society as ordinary work. But malaka is not ordinary or work. If you've been listening to this program for a long time, you know that malak is a very common term in Hebrew. It means messenger. That's what malak means. Malak is typically assigned to the spiritual and heavenly messengers of Yahweh. They're the ones that Yahweh deploys to protect those who are working in the interests of his people and are devoted to Yahweh. They're the ones that push away the storms from wherever I live and to keep the jihadists from fulfilling their desire to kill me. They're malak. Malak is a masculine noun, even though the malak are no more feminine than they are masculine. But that's malak. My life has thousands of malak around me. When I accepted this mission from Yahweh, now 24 years ago, he answered my concerns, and I had 3, with the 91st Mizmor, or Psalm. And in it, he promised that he would provide thousands of malak to support what we are achieving together. I'm certain they did so around Dowd. They likely did so around Moshe. But God has clearly promised that if I would accept this mission, which I have, and if I would stay steadfast towards this work that he has outlined for us and our collaboration, which I certainly have done, that they would be all around me. But you say it's written in the feminine. The only difference between malak and malaka is the ending, which would make it feminine. That does not make this person feminine. It identifies this person with something that is feminine. What is the single most important thing associated with the man who is most responsible for the work of calling God's people back home? Who is the first person who has correctly identified and deduced the purpose of Yom Kipurym, which is the family reunion where Yahweh, a name no one knew until we began this mission together, returns with Dowd, a man that no one perceived as the returning king, as the Messiah, as the Son of God, or the Savior who fulfilled Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym. Is there something feminine associated with this man? Now, if you're paying attention, you know the answer. What is there, Rich, that is feminine, that is associated with the Towrah?
Soul.
Ruach. 7 of them. The Ruach of Yahweh Ruach is a feminine noun. The first person in all of human history to have the seven spirit of Yahowah, enabling the success of the collaboration with God himself on behalf of our King Dowd, is the Choder. And the Choder has the seven spirits of Yahowah, including the very spirit of Yahowah, the Ruach of Yahowah. The Ruach of Bien, understanding. The Ruach of Chokmah, intellect. The Ruach of Gabor, of great strength. Ruach of Itzeh, the ability to frame the entire portrait and to see the entire picture that God has provided for the first time from beginning to end, and to explain it. The spirit of Yirah, great respect for Yahweh and his name. And the spirit of Dowd, of knowledge regarding all of these things, literally serving as the tree of knowledge. When Dowd would introduce the Choder, and he was the first to do so 300 years before Isaiah did in the 11th chapter of Yeshayah, he began using all feminine attributes. And by the way, every one of those attributes that I just shared with you was written in the feminine. Chokmah, Bien, Gabora, Yara. They were all, every single one of them was written in the feminine. And Dowd, when he introduces the Choder, begins his whole soliloquy on Chokmah and uses feminine attributes to speak of a person who is clearly a man. Choder, the male noun, a title. So there is one person in all of human history that has been distinguished by the seven Ruach of Yahowah, and there is nothing more spiritual that is feminine than the Ruach of Yahowah associated with the Choder. And it is our collaboration, our work, Asha, that has been the first to reintroduce Yahweh's name in 2,500 years. The first to identify that Yahweh's Son, the former and returning King, the Messiah, is Dowd. And that he in his second of three lives fulfilled Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym. And he is the one who is returning with Yahweh on Kipurym. Not a person knew that for 2,500 years, which means not a person could capitalize on this offer and an answer until Yahweh provided the Malakah. I would have preferred to have stayed anonymous. Yahweh did not want that to be the case. He wants you to know and understand Yada, the man who is telling you these things, because they are so radically different from what the religious have said. They're so radically and contrary to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that God wanted to provide every opportunity to endorse, to support, to corroborate this message. By saying these things, it's as if Yahweh was doing what he did 3,450 years ago when he came off of Torah with his brilliant light and stood beside Moshe and to say, I am the one who is speaking through him. Now, when God did that the last time, Israel, you told him to shut up and go away. And I know you're not listening now. But a time of trouble is going to befall you. and you will listen then. But that is what God is conveying in this message. And if you think, well, that's really egotistical for you to write yourself into the story, hell no, it's not. I didn't write myself into the story. I didn't ask for any of this. As a matter of fact, every time that Yahweh ups the ante and says something more about our collaboration, the more difficult my life becomes. I'm not complaining. I signed up for this. I agreed to it. I like the job. I love Yahweh. I respect my king. I serve his people. But every time that God has another statement that the only logical, rational, informed conclusion is our collaboration together, I get a bullseye right on my forehead. Lots of people to mock and to attack. Do I gain anything from it? Absolutely not. I'm going to Shamayim and going to be with Yahweh forevermore if I quit tomorrow. But I'm going to endure your insults. I'm going to put this target, I'm going to accept this target that God has put on my head. Because he also has 1,000 malach, keeping anyone from actually doing any harm. And we're going to proceed through these next 8 years. And we're going to accomplish the mission. Yahweh knew that since they would not listen to him, and they even erased his name, that he would have to speak bluntly and vociferously about the one that he would call, the one who is the spiritual messenger of heaven, on behalf of his beloved son, on behalf of his Mikre, on behalf of his Bereth, on behalf of Yisrael and Yehudim. He would have to plaster his titles and job credentials everywhere, and he did, so that you would listen. With every program where I share a Mizmor psalm, a Nabi prophet, or Torah instruction with you, you are listening to God's instruction and teaching come alive in your midst, where it is relevant to your situation right now, today. And that has never happened before. There are 25,000 pages of translations and analysis in these books that surround me, all free at yadayah.com. Yada, to know, Yahweh, all free to you, with some 10,000 insights previously unheralded. And some of them so profound they represent the greatest discoveries in human history. Yes, Yahweh knew 3,450 years ago that we would work together in this way. I may not have been the best choice. I may not even have been a good choice. I may be way below your standards. But it doesn't matter, because you didn't choose me. He did. And he equipped me with his Ruach to do this job to his satisfaction. And I'm here committed to it. And you're either going to listen or you're going to die. It really is that simple. It's a life and death proposition. You're going to listen and respond and live, or you're going to be a jerk like the religious have been against God for the last 6,000 years, and you're going to die. Your choice. As for me, I'm going to do the work of the Malaka to the greatest extent possible. Nothing anyone will say and do is going to change that. But you can have a profound effect on your soul by how you respond to it. And any soul which, by association, continually attempts to perform any part of the work of the Malaka, the spiritual messenger, during this life-sustaining and essential day, that specific and individual soul I will eliminate such that it no longer exists from being around the family or striving against the community of living souls. Karat called out, stupidly called Leviticus 23:30. I, based upon Yahweh's guidance, have been very cut and dry when it comes to those who choose to challenge the teaching that I am providing on behalf of Yahweh. Somebody that piped up again today. It's not to be tolerated. In our community, it's like a cancer. I didn't ask for this role, but I was given it, and I'm going to do it. And if you wish to oppose it, you're going to die. You're going to be separated from the covenant. We had a whole group that came out of a conspiracy cult, that have gone back to a conspiracy cult, that thought they could do it better. No, you can't. What did God say when Miriam said, yeah, we too speak for God? Hell no, you don't. Anyone that is trying to do the job that I've been assigned to do is going to face the consequence. You can support it, and that's a really good thing. But you can't do it. And you can't be in conflict with it. Now you might say, well, you're talking really big there. No, I'm not. God is. There is no other rational explanation for who this Malaka is. None. No other rational explanation for who the Towrah is. No other rational explanation for who the Nakar is, or the Nakri, or the final Zeroah, or the Bashar Herald, or the man from Edom, or the Adama Parah. That salesman in the end that salvages Dowd's reputation. For my Dowd, on behalf of El Dowd. It's all the same story. I don't know what God saw in me, why he chose me, but he knew perhaps that just there was nobody else, and I would be willing, and that once started, I wouldn't give up. You know, maybe there was an attitude or an aptitude that he thought, hey, you know, maybe I can capitalize on that. Yeah, I've got some unique aptitudes. I'm really, really judgmental. My mind works very quickly. I make connections between things to go from knowledge to understanding. We've got decent retention. I'm not the least bit uncomfortable laying my thoughts out in writing and exposing them to criticism or acceptance, or of looking at you in the eye and sharing these things with you. Perhaps that's were credentials enough, just the right attitude and some attributes that could serve the purpose. Maybe it's nothing more than I was willing, and that God knew I would never give up. There's a lot writing on this now. You see, the fulfillment of Shabuah is 8 years from the end. Taruw'ah, just 10 days from this day. And on this day, there is no passing it. You're either there and you have benefited from Shabuah and Taruw'ah as a result of what Dowd did on Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym, and you're celebrating the return of our King, my King, our God, my God, there in his city, brilliant, loving, exciting, empowering, nurturing. encouraging, or you're dead. And if I had told God no, since there was nobody else, if I had given up early on this process and not written these books, not been willing to speak to you in this way, you know how many people would be part of the Shabuah harvest? How many would take advantage of the Towrah gleaning? How many would be there that the white chariot could pick up and bring into Jerusalem on behalf of the sacrifice of the Adam of Perah? None. And oh, by the way, should anybody be envious and say, well, I could do that job better? Perhaps you could. But guess what? You have to be willing to have every bone in your body broken. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to go to the most vulgar person in the history of humankind and allow him and his minions to beat you to a bloody pulp right there on the top of the Temple Mount with everybody viewing it worldwide? Because that's the sacrifice of the Adam of Perah. Are you willing to do that? How's your pain threshold? How's your sense of devotion? It's part of the job. And you can't just say, okay, I'll endure that, but you have to build up this reservoir of understanding and a commitment so that you understand how to do that job, why you're doing that job, and what the benefit of that job is, and why, in the end, the ultimate sacrifice costs you ultimately nothing. Because my body would be useless at that time and my soul is everything. And now I'm gaining just this added little bit of attaboy, son, from my Father. And maybe even a little glean of appreciation for the many thousands who will benefit from that sacrifice as Yahweh transforms that broken body into the gift of life, opening the pages of the book of knowledge for the benefit of his people. That's the message. Can you capitalize on it? Well, certainly, this is a decree against religion, not of work. God does not want his people endeavoring to replace the role of the Mikre or the Malaka or the reconciliation of his people. And listen, you've got to have an appreciation for what's going on here. Yahweh established the Moed Mikre, Pesach, Matsah, Bikuwrym, Shabuah, Taruw'ah, Kipurym, Sukkah, through Moshe, elaborating on them in the Torah 3,450 years ago. The children of Israel did not understand them. They did not capitalize upon them. There was a dress rehearsal. Pesach became the doorway to life. Matzah became the means to separate from religious and political corruption and oppression. Bikuwrym was the symbol of, after they had left Mitzrayim, of crossing through the Red Sea and becoming the firstborn children, where Shabuah symbolically is the offering of the first narratives out of the Torah on Mount Cherub. So God has done these things. He gave us another dress rehearsal prior to that of Pesach with Abraham and Yishak going up Mount Moriah in 1968 BCE, year 2000, as the dress rehearsal for what the Son of God would achieve as the Passover lamb. There are mileposts along the way and great achievements, but nothing is as great or as deserving as Dowd volunteering to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikuwrym, to be crucified by the Romans on Pesach, to have his soul go into Sheowl with our guilt on Matzah, and then to trust Yahweh and the Ruach to release him on Bikuwrym, to become the firstborn of firstborn children. These are the great events. And we have come to know that Shabuah is the next harvest, begins the time of trouble, and that the time of trouble ends on Taruw'ah, and that ultimately that is the greatest show on earth with the sacrifice of the Adonai Parah, with Eliah returning to orchestrate the event, and how this brings in Dowd's return to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant upon Kipurym with the blood of a bull, the Adonai Parah, and a goat, Eliah, ushering in the time of happily ever after, this family reunion, so we can return to the garden on Sukkah. I have a number of roles in that. I am the one cultivating the harvest for Shabuah and Taruw'ah. I'm the one offering the sacrifice on Taruw'ah. But mostly, my job is just Malaka. Truly, it all boils down to that. That is my job, Malaka. 24 years so far, 32 when it's all done, of Malaka, of being a conduit for the seventh Ruach of Yahowah, so that the seven Ruach of Yahowah could use my mouth, use my voice, use my hands to convey this message to you. From God's point of view, that's a life well lived. I hope for you that you listen, you read, you think, and you capitalized on this offer. For those that do, I wish you a very happy celebration of Yom Kipurym, starting at sunset this evening, wherever you may be. May Yahweh bless you forevermore.